Usually when we think about a physical recording, a photograph or a vinyl record or even a home movie, there's this expectation of preservation.
Right, yeah.
It's like catching a butterfly in amber. You record a moment and the media just sort of holds it there perfectly frozen in time.
Yeah, there's definitely an inherent comfort in that assumption.
Yeah.
I mean, we like the idea that our past is securely stored, archived, and just ready to be recalled exactly as it was whenever we want it.
Exactly.
We treat media like this uncorrupted memory bank.
But then you step into the world of decaying magnetic tape and abandoned retail spaces and, well, the dark corners of internet lore, and suddenly that amber starts to look really cloudy.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at a landscape of memory and media that is literally rotting from the inside out. So today we are taking a deep dive for the ultimate learner. If you are the kind of person who loves connecting really disparate dots to find a massive, unexpected aha moment, you are in the right place.
It is quite the journey today.
It really is. We have a massive stack of sources today. On one side, we've got these deep dives into the nostalgic physical world of the 1980s, 90s, and early 2000s. We're talking retro employee training videos, the rise and fall of MTV, and the definitive lists of America's dead retail giants.
The graveyard of the mall era.
Exactly. And then on the other side, we have sources detailing the darkest corners of internet fiction and real-world espionage. We've got analog horror web series, emergency alert system scenarios, the collaborative SCP Foundation wiki, and the very real, very secretive world of shortwave radio number stations.
Which is a mind-bending stack of information to try and synthesize.
Right. So the question is, how do we get from cheesy 1980s Pizza Hut training tapes to terrifying internet lore about alternate dimensions and shape-shifting demons?
It seems like a massive leap.
It does, but the mission of this deep dive is to trace the death of physical media and consumer spaces and explore exactly how the decaying aesthetics of VHS tapes have been weaponized to create a brilliant new genre of psychological horror.
It's basically a complete subversion of nostalgia. We are looking at how the mundane artifacts of our past, like the physical places we shopped or the corporate training videos that taught teenagers how to make a pizza, literally became the foundational aesthetic for modern dread.
So to understand how we get to interdimensional shape-shifting demons, we really have to start at the absolute baseline of that mundane reality, the golden age of physical media and deeply, intensely earnest corporate culture.
The training videos.
Yes. Have you ever gone down the rabbit hole of 1980s and 90s fast food training videos? Because watching these things today, it feels like looking at an alien civilization.
They really do. And what's fascinating here is the sheer, unironic enthusiasm they contain. They represent a baseline of absolute mundane normalcy.
Right. Take the 1988 Pizza Hut training video from our source list. The whole premise is about creating an experience for pizza lovers. I sat down and watched this, and I just couldn't get over the absolute sincerity of it.
It's pure corporate optimism.
It is. They literally refer to the special seasoning they sprinkle on the pizzas and breadsticks as, quote, fairy dust. And the core mantra they are drilling into the heads of these 16-year-old employees is, our job is to never let them down.
Delivered with complete militant optimism.
Exactly, with a straight face.
Well, that optimism is a fascinating cultural artifact on its own. When you look at that Pizza Hut video, or the 1993 Subway training video, or even the incredibly distorted, flickery Showbiz Pizza Place party line tape, you are seeing a very specific era of corporate psychology.
It's so strange to see now.
Right, because these were entirely uncynical tools. Their goal was to standardize human behavior across thousands of physical locations, sure, but they did it by attempting to build a genuine, unified corporate culture.
Yeah.
And they distributed this culture on low-fidelity VHS tapes, shipped in cardboard sleeves to break rooms across the entire country.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because I want to push back on the idea that these are just boring historical footnotes. Watching these is like finding a cultural time capsule, but it's a capsule buried in the food court of a dead mall. Why are we so obsessed with the sheer cheesiness of 1990s corporate instructional tapes today?
I think it's because it was so pervasive, and we've lost that innocence.
Yeah, and it wasn't just some random middle manager talking to a shaky camera either. The 1990 McDonald's training video actually features Michael Jordan.
Oh, right, the Michael Jordan.
Yeah. At the absolute height of his career, he is standing in a McDonald's looking straight into the camera, and he is directly comparing a customer who wants a good filet-o-fish to a basketball fan who wants a good game from him. He actually says that regardless of his mood, he has to deliver.
Which is wild when you think about the underlying psychology there. They are explicitly telling a minimum wage teenager working a deep fryer that their responsibility to the customer is equivalent to a world-class athlete's responsibility to a packed stadium.
It's a staggering level of psychological conditioning.
It really is. It's completely gamified.
Or look at the Kmart Smart Plan Sales VHS from the early 1990s. This video explains exactly why we used to get constantly hounded by cashiers to buy replacement plans for the most random, inexpensive items. They gamified the interaction for the employees through this taped instruction.
They had to hit their quotas.
Right. But the one that really caught my attention was the 1986 Macy's security training video.
Ah, yeah, because of where it was filmed?
Exactly. It was filmed inside the massive department store after closing time. The lights are half dimmed, the escalators are totally off, and it is completely, eerily empty.
And that specific visual, a massive empty retail space after hours, it introduces a crucial concept that we really have to define right now.
Yeah.
Which is liminal spaces.
Liminal spaces.
Yeah, a liminal space is basically a place of transition. It's a waiting room or a hotel hallway or an airport terminal at 3 in the morning.
I always explain it to people like walking through your old elementary school at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, the entire architecture of the building is designed for chaos and noise and thousands of kids. So when it's completely silent and empty, your brain just triggers this mismatch error.
Yes.
It expects movement, and when it doesn't find any, that error manifests as pure dread.
Precisely. We are biologically wired to be uneasy in spaces that violate their intended purpose.
Yeah.
And those 1990s corporate instructional tapes are so fascinating because they inadvertently capture these spaces all the time.
Just empty break rooms and dark aisles.
Right. They represent a world of absolute, unquestioned normalcy that simply does not exist anymore. The tracking lines on the VHS, the muffled audio, the synthesized background music, it all subconsciously communicates the safety and predictability of the physical retail space, which, back then, was the undisputed center of American consumer life.
But it wasn't just fast food and retail workers living in this analog physical world. For anyone growing up in this era, our entire consumption of culture, specifically music, was inextricably tied to physical objects and strictly scheduled broadcasts.
Oh, totally.
If we are talking about the physical monuments of the analog era, we have to talk about MTV, back when the M actually stood for music.
The cultural synchronization achieved by MTV in the 80s and 90s is almost hard to comprehend for anyone born after the internet.
Seriously, think about Total Request Live, or TRL, running from 1998 into the late 2000s. You have Carson Daly broadcasting live from Times Square.
The absolute peak of that era.
Yeah. You had a top 10 music video countdown, a live studio audience, and literal crowds of screaming teenagers holding up signs in the streets of New York City, which you could see right through the studio windows. It completely defined the after-school zeitgeist.
TRL was a daily, unmissable event. But what's vital to understand here is the spatial and temporal restriction of it all.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you had to be physically present in front of a heavy cathode ray tube television set at exactly 3:13 p.m. Eastern Time. If you missed the video for the song you liked, you couldn't just search for it on a smartphone. It was gone. You just had to wait until the network decided to play it again.
I want to push back on the romanticism of that for a second, though, because we look back at MTV with this massive wave of nostalgia, but wasn't it also incredibly restrictive? We were entirely at the mercy of a few corporate executives in New York who dictated exactly what the entire country was going to listen to.
It was a massive monoculture, without a doubt.
Right.
And it was deeply restrictive.
Right.
But that restriction is exactly what created the shared cultural experience, because everyone had the same limited menu. Everyone could talk about the exact same events the next day at school or work.
That's true. Water cooler moments.
Exactly. If you stayed up from midnight to 2 a.m. to watch 120 minutes, you were part of a very specific subculture that saw the premiere of Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Oh.
Yeah. Or if you watched Headbangers Ball with Ricky Rockman, or Alternative Nation with VJ Kennedy, or Yo, MTV Raps with Fab Five Freddy and Ed Lover, you were participating in a synchronized national viewing party.
Even their game shows were tied purely to physical music consumption. Like, I'm thinking of shows like 12 Angry Viewers, where a jury of fans would literally sit around and aggressively debate which music videos deserved to make the network's rotational playlist.
That was such a brilliant concept.
Or Turn It Up, which was an early 90s game show based entirely on identifying, like, 3-second visual clips of music videos.
Because the visual was just as important as the audio. And the entire ecosystem was designed to drive you toward a physical action. Because once you saw a video on MTV, what was the necessary next step? You couldn't download it.
Right, you had to physically leave your house, get in a car, and drive to a music megastore.
Exactly. And that brings us to the physical architecture of media distribution, the stores themselves. And Tower Records is perhaps the most poignant example of this era from our sources.
Yeah, from the list of the 50 retail chains that no longer exist.
Right. Founded in 1960, they were the absolute trailblazers of the music megastore concept.
And what made Tower Records unique wasn't just its size, right? It was the hyperlocalization. The inventory for a Tower Records in Los Angeles was vastly different from one in Chicago because it was passionately curated by the actual staff who lived in that specific city.
They acted as local tastemakers.
Yeah, they really understood the local punk scene or the local hip-hop scene.
But that heavy physical footprint eventually became a massive liability. When we look at the data on retail failures, Tower Records is a glaring warning sign of the digital cliff.
How bad was it?
They lost money for 13 consecutive quarters before declaring bankruptcy for the second time in 2006. They were essentially undercut simultaneously by two things: the rise of online file sharing, like Napster and LimeWire, and by big box discount chains using CDs as loss leaders.
Oh, right. So Best Buy would sell a CD below cost just to get you in the door to buy a fridge.
Precisely. Tower
Yeah.
couldn't compete with that.
And it wasn't just Tower Records. Sam Goody, which started in Manhattan way back in the 40s and accounted for a staggering 7% of all 33, and a third RPM vinyl records sold in the entire United States in 1955.
7% is huge.
It's massive. But they eventually bled out and folded into FYE, and Virgin Megastores, they lost $340 million in just 2 years before they finally folded.
The transition away from these stores wasn't just a shift in commerce, though. It was a profound sociological loss. We lost what sociologists call the third place.
Okay, let's break that down for the listener. What exactly is a third place?
So the first place is your home, where you live and rest. The second place is your workplace or your school, where you have specific duties and hierarchies. The third place is an anchor of community life.
Like a public space.
Right? It's a space where you gather, interact casually, and form a broader societal identity. Malls, record stores, and bookstores functioned as vital third places for teenagers and young adults for decades. You didn't just go to Tower Records to buy a CD. You went there to see who else was there. You went to look at the posters, to physically occupy a space dedicated to your interests.
I want you to think about this right now as you're listening. Think about the last time you actually held a physical mixtape, or the last time you had to blow the dust out of a VHS tape before shoving it into a VCR.
It's a very tactile memory.
It is. Doesn't that physical interaction feel like a completely different reality? Did the shift to digital just make things more convenient, or did we actually lose a physical place in our culture?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we absolutely lost a physical place. In fact, we lost thousands of them. And that trade-off resulted in the greatest collapse of commercial real estate in modern history, the retail apocalypse.
The carnage is just staggering when you actually look at the numbers. Think about Blockbuster Video. At its absolute peak, Blockbuster had over 9,000 stores in the United States alone. They had 65 million registered customers. The company was valued at $3 billion.
They were seemingly invincible. But their business model relied heavily on punishing their own customers.
Oh, the late fees.
Exactly. A massive portion of their revenue came from late fees. So when Netflix arrived with a DVD by mail service that explicitly eliminated late fees, Blockbuster was structurally incapable of pivoting without destroying their own revenue stream.
And that psychological resentment from customers, I mean, we all hated paying those fees.
Everyone did.
So when a more convenient option arrived, there was zero brand loyalty left to save them. By 2014, Blockbuster was entirely defunct, filing for bankruptcy with over $900 million in debt.
Then you look at the bookstore industry. Borders was a giant, but they made a catastrophic strategic error. In the early 2000s, instead of developing their own e-commerce platform, they essentially handed their online operations over to Amazon, thinking the internet was just a supplementary sales channel.
Oh, where? That is a massive miscalculation.
It was fatal. By the time they realized their mistake, it was way too late. They had to liquidate 400 stores in 2011. Meanwhile, Barnes & Noble survived specifically because they invested heavily in their own digital infrastructure.
You also had companies that just actively self-sabotaged. Like Circuit City, they had over 1,500 stores. But in this desperate attempt to cut costs, they decided to stop paying sales
Right,
commissions.
they fired their best salespeople.
Yeah, they fired all of their most experienced, knowledgeable staff and just replaced them with cheaper, inexperienced workers. They also supersized their stores, making them these massive, sterile, impersonal warehouses. So they alienated their workers and their customers at the exact same time.
Even the Sharper image, which was the absolute king of mall gadgets.
Oh man, the massage chairs.
Yeah, the place you went to sit in the massage chairs and look at expensive air purifiers, they went bankrupt in 2008. Why? Because Apple and Best Buy started selling the exact same high-end tech, but with far better customer service and return policies.
And if you contrast that massive list of dead retailers with the current top 50, you see who survived the digital cliff. Walmart sits comfortably at number 1, driven largely by their massive grocery presence. Amazon is obviously number 2. By 2019, nearly 60% of all U.S. households were Prime members.
That is just incredible market penetration.
And then Costco holds its ground by relying on absolute consistency. I love this detail. They famously refuse to ever raise the $1.50 price of their hot dog combo.
It's brilliant, really.
It is. They use it as an anchor of normalcy that drives incredible membership loyalty. Best Buy is surviving via aggressive price matching, but for the ones that died, the physical footprint of all these bankruptcies is almost unimaginable. We are talking about tens of millions of square feet of commercial real estate suddenly abandoned.
Turning massive shopping malls into rotting concrete shells.
Right. I mean, we spent decades building these massive physical monuments like Hudson's in Detroit, which at one point was the tallest department store in the world, and now they are literally demolished or just sitting empty. So when thousands of video rental stores and music shops closed their doors forever, what actually happened to all that physical stuff?
Well, millions of VHS tapes, cassette tapes, and corporate training manuals were just left to rot. They ended up in landfills or sitting in boxes in abandoned, leaky warehouses. There is a deeply telling document from our sources today from the Canadian government.
Yes, the digitization one.
Right. It's simply titled The Digitization of VHS Videotapes. It was written as an urgent plea to archives and libraries to transfer their magnetic tape to digital formats immediately before the physical media literally degrades beyond repair.
Because it doesn't last forever.
No, magnetic tape is organic in its decay. It has a strict lifespan. A VHS tape is essentially a plastic ribbon coated in iron oxide particles, which is basically magnetic rust. Over time, that binder degrades. The tape physically sheds its magnetic particles, the visual tracking slips, the audio begins to warble, the colors bleed into each other.
The memory literally rots away.
Yes.
Yeah.
This isn't just about businesses failing. It's about the rapid obsolescence of an entire way of life, creating a massive graveyard of lost media.
And when a medium dies, it leaves a ghostly absence. And it is exactly in this decaying, abandoned analog aesthetic, the grainy VHS tapes, the empty malls, that a terrifying new genre of internet storytelling was born.
Nostalgia hijacks.
Exactly. The internet looked at the wreckage of the 1990s and turned it into analog horror. We have a great list from Collider exploring this.
Analog horror is a masterclass in psychological dread because it takes the exact visual and auditory language of our childhoods, the retro training videos, the local news graphics from the 80s and 90s, and it weaponizes them against us.
Let's break down exactly how this worked by looking at some of the foundational series of the genre. Take Gemini Home Entertainment.
Oh, that's a classic one.
Right. If you pull up one of these videos, it centers around these fictional 80s and 90s companies with names like Regented Computing or Optica Video. At first glance, they look exactly like the mundane, slightly boring VHS tapes you'd rent from a library or buy at a defunct electronics store. They are styled as innocent nature documentaries or basic astronomy lessons.
But the facade is incredibly brittle.
Mm.
The series uses that dry, low-fidelity, unbothered tone of a 1990s educational video to slowly reveal an overarching apocalyptic nightmare.
The terrifying twist in Gemini is that Earth is facing an invasion from something called the Iris. It is a sentient, rogue planet that literally resembles a massive, fleshy eyeball in the solar system.
It's incredibly unsettling.
And this planet is sending parasitic creatures down to Earth, things called Woodcrawlers that mimic humans, and a biological corruption called deep root disease.
What makes it terrifying is the juxtaposition. The video is calmly explaining how a parasitic alien creature will hollow out your nervous system. But it's doing so with cheerful synthesizer music and the blocky blue screen text of a high school AV club project.
Then you have the Mandela Catalog. This series absolutely exploded on the internet. It
Yeah.
is set in the fictional Mandela County, Wisconsin, mostly in the 90s and early 2000s.
The core horror of the Mandela catalog relies on the concept of alternates.
What are alternates exactly?
They are these otherworldly entities heavily implied to be actual biblical demons, but their methodology is purely psychological. They don't just kill you physically. Their goal is to psychologically torture their human victims by revealing impossible, terrifying truths until the victim is driven to suicide.
Which the series clinicalizes as MAD, right?
Yes, metaphysical awareness disorder. And once the victim is out of the way, the alternate shapeshifts to assume their identity as a doppelganger.
And the lore goes so deep into biblical corruption. The entire series kicks off with a corrupted VHS tape of a children's cartoon. It's the exact kind of cheaply animated tape a kid might watch in Sunday school depicting the nativity story. But the tape glitches and the narrative twists, revealing that the Archangel Gabriel is actually Satan in disguise.
Overthrowing the real Gabriel to deceive humanity from the very beginning of the New Testament.
It's so dark. The world building is incredibly intricate, following characters like Police Lieutenant Thatcher Davis, who is hunting the alternate that assimilated his partner, or Adam Murray, a teenager running a paranormal investigation club. And there's this overarching threat known as the intruder.
And what's brilliant is how the creator pays such incredibly close attention to the actual media formats. Act 1 of the story is entirely rendered in degraded VHS quality, matching the early 90s setting. But as the story jumps forward into Act 2 in the late 2000s, the aesthetic shifts to early blocky digital video compression.
Oh, and there's that specific episode where a character named Dave Lee works at a video repair store, and he decides to test the recursive generation loss of VHS tapes.
Right, and we have to unpack the mechanism of generation loss because it is the entire scientific foundation of why analog horror works.
Before.
Generation loss occurs when you make a copy of a copy of a copy. With digital files, a copy is an exact one-to-one clone. But with analog magnetic tape, every time you copy a tape, you lose data. The audio degrades, the visual tracking slips, the colors wash out.
So Dave Lee basically copies a tape of a church continuously until the data degrades so heavily that an alternate literally manifests and attacks through the static.
Exactly. And that plays directly into the neuroscience of the uncanny valley. The human brain is a hyper-tuned pattern recognition machine. We evolved to instantly recognize human faces so we could identify our tribe and to instantly recognize predators in the brush. When you look at a heavily degraded VHS tape, the image is full of dark, fuzzy, distorted spaces, literal gaps in visual data.
So our brain just tries to fill in the gaps.
Yes. When an alternate in the video has a face that is just slightly stretched or eyes that are completely blacked out by generation loss, your brain's facial recognition software throws a critical error. It looks almost human, but not quite.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it's like finding a home video from your 8th birthday, but half the people in the video don't have faces. It takes the ultimate symbol of domestic safety and completely perverts it.
It strips away the comfort of our recorded past and replaces it with an active dread. We even see this crossing over into mainstream media with Archive 81.
Oh, right, the podcast that became a Netflix show.
Exactly. The creators had to translate the eldritch horror of audio tape recorders into VHS tapes for the visual medium, really leaning into the horror of the vast unknowable that hides in the static.
But the genius of analog horror is that it doesn't just hijack old physical VHS tapes. It also hijacks the invisible waves bouncing through the air around us right now. Specifically, emergency broadcasts and radio frequencies, which brings us to a fascinating and deeply unsettling subgenre: EAS scenarios.
The emergency alert system. It is the ultimate authoritative medium.
If you look at the TV tropes page dedicated to these EAS scenarios, it outlines this massive community of creators telling fictional disaster stories using nothing but the stark, terrifying interface of the National Warning System. We all know the sound.
Oh yeah, it induces immediate anxiety.
It starts with that horrific, jarring, screeching data burst, followed by the long attention tone, and then that robotic text-to-speech voice reading a warning, scrolling across a blue screen.
That sound is an incredible piece of acoustic engineering, specifically designed to cut through ambient noise and command absolute attention. It triggers an involuntary adrenaline spike.
And creators use this format to tell complex horror stories. The tropes are amazing. You have Lost in Silence, where the communication goes down right after the alarm, so you're just left in agonizing silence, knowing something is wrong but having no idea what.
The purest distillation of the fear of the unknown.
Then you have Chekhov's Volcano, where Yellowstone or literally every volcano on Earth erupts. There's the angry ES trope, where the automated computer system gets so frustrated with citizens refusing to evacuate that it breaks its programming and starts swearing at them. And of course, alien invasions.
But there's a massive legal caveat to creating these videos. Creators must use strict, massive disclaimers.
Why? Just to stop panic.
No, it's a technical issue. If a creator uses valid, mathematically accurate EAS tones in their audio mix, and that YouTube video is played near an actual television or radio broadcasting station, it can literally trigger real-world emergency hardware.
Wait, seriously?
Yes. The Federal Communications Commission monitors this aggressively. The hardware cannot distinguish between a teenager's analog horror project on a laptop and a legitimate national emergency issued by the president. If you broadcast those tones, you face massive federal fines.
That proves just how deeply ingrained our technological infrastructure is. But if we pivot to the real-world counterpart of hacking the airwaves, things get incredibly real. Let's talk about the reality of number stations, based on the article from War on the Rocks. Because this is where the line between analog horror and actual espionage completely blurs.
Number stations are the most persistent, eerie remnants of the Cold War, and they are entirely non-fictional.
So if you buy a shortwave radio and start tuning through the static, eventually you might stumble across a broadcast that is just a digitally synthesized, robotic voice, often female, endlessly repeating groups of numbers. Or sometimes it's just strings of Morse code.
These stations are active, operational, one-way communications from global intelligence agencies to field agents operating deep behind enemy lines.
Yeah, can you explain the mechanics of this? Why are we using 1940s shortwave radio technology to run modern espionage in the age of the internet?
Because shortwave radio possesses a unique physical property. The radio waves can be directed upward at the ionosphere, which is a layer of the Earth's upper atmosphere. The signal hits the ionosphere and literally bounces back down to Earth thousands of miles away, reflecting well beyond the curvature of the horizon.
So a physical transmitter located deep inside Russia can bounce a signal off the sky and reach a spy sitting on a park bench in Washington, D.C.
Exactly, and it leaves zero digital footprint. There is no IP address, no server to hack. However, because anyone in the world with a shortwave receiver can hear the broadcast, the encryption of the message has to be absolutely flawless.
Which brings us to the one-time pad. I need you to explain this to me because the idea of an unbreakable code sounds impossible.
It is the only mathematically unbreakable encryption system in existence. Imagine both the intelligence agency and the sky have an identical physical notepad. Every single page contains a completely random sequence of numbers.
Okay, I'm with you.
Let's say I want to send you the word hello. First, we convert hello into numbers based on the alphabet, so 8 for H, 5 for E, and so on.
All right, so we have a string of numbers representing the word.
Right. Now, I look at the first page of my random number pad. I use a technique called false addition. I add my message to the random numbers, but I do not carry the tens digit.
Ah, so it completely scrambles the map.
Exactly. I broadcast the resulting gibberish numbers over the shortwave radio. You, the spy, hear the numbers, pull out your identical pad, and apply false subtraction to reveal the word hello. And here is the crucial part. Once that page is used, it is physically destroyed.
It is never used again.
Never. So even if the FBI records the broadcast with supercomputers, it's totally useless without the physical piece of paper in the spy's pocket.
And history is full of real-world examples of this. The KGB used captured code books to send fake signals back via number stations. In 1983, the CIA's Alexander Grodnik was caught receiving orders this way.
And it's not ancient history.
Right. In 2001, the Cuban 5 spy ring was dismantled in the U.S., decrypting these numbers via Toshiba laptops. In 2013, a German couple was caught spying for Russia while receiving a transmission.
Monitor groups confirm that Russian intelligence, the SVR and GRU in North Korea, via Radio Pyongyang, still use them today. North Korea actually disguises their codes as math problems for, quote, distant university students.
Wait, so you're telling me anyone right now can log on to a WebSDR in the Netherlands and literally listen to an active Russian spy transmission? That's not a creepypasta, that's reality.
It is entirely real, and this raises an important question. Why does an emergency tone or a robotic voice reading numbers instantly evoke dread? It's because these are authoritative utilitarian mediums. When the system designed to protect you delivers apocalyptic news or hides lethal espionage in plain sight, our sense of security shatters.
And internet creators realized the terror of cold, bureaucratic language. They asked, What if we created a massive crowdsourced universe that documents the end of the world using the exact tone of a dry corporate incident report?
Which brings us to the ultimate collaborative bureaucracy, the SCP Foundation.
Secure, contain, protect. It started on 4chan in 2007 with SCP-173. What makes the SCP Foundation so revolutionary isn't just the monsters, it's the formatting, right?
Exactly. Every entry is written as a highly classified mock scientific document detailing the exact containment procedures required to keep an anomaly locked up. The tone is relentlessly clinical, utilizing black redaction bars and the phrase, data expunged.
They categorize everything. Safe means it's easily contained. Euclid means it's unpredictable. Keter means it's incredibly difficult to contain and poses a severe threat. Thaumiel anomalies are used to contain other SCPs, and Apollyon means it's impossible to contain, basically the end of the world.
The creativity is astounding. Let's look at SCP-173, the one that started it all. It's a concrete and rebar statue that is completely immobile as long as you look at it. But the second you break a line of sight, even to blink, it moves at impossible speeds and snaps your neck.
It's a brilliant manipulation of a basic human necessity. Then you have SCP-055, the anti-meme, an object that actively erases itself from human memory. You can only describe it by what it is not.
The logistical horror of fighting an enemy that deletes the realization that you are fighting it is incredible.
We also have SCP-087, the infinite dark stairwell with a floating face. And bridging back to our earlier discussion, SCP-3008.
The infinite IKEA.
Yes. On the outside, it's a standard IKEA, but once you walk inside and lose sight of the exit, you enter an infinite pocket dimension. Customers trapped inside build fortifications out of furniture, and at night, when the lights power down, the employees come out.
Faceless humanoid creatures in yellow and blue striped uniforms that become violently aggressive.
Yeah.
It is a direct, terrifying nod to the massive retail structures we discussed in Section 3.
Then there's SCP-1609. This is my favorite. It used to be a benevolent, teleporting wooden chair that would just appear behind you if you needed to sit down. But a rival group, the Global Occult Coalition, put it through a wood chipper.
Because they believe in destroying anomalies rather than containing them.
Right. But it didn't destroy it. It just made it angry. Now it's a sentient, murderous pile of wood mulch that teleports directly into your lungs if you wear a military uniform near it.
It perfectly illustrates the consequences of brute force. And this universe has grown so massive that it sparked real-world legal drama. Andrei Duxin, a Russian trademark troll, tried to exploit the Creative Commons license and illegitimately trademark the SCP logo.
He was shutting down independent creators. But the global community, including massive YouTubers, raised over $140,000 to fight him in Russian court, and eventually his trademark was canceled.
There was also the ethical moment with the image of SCP-173. The original post used a photo of a real sculpture by Japanese artist Izumi Kato without permission.
Kato was gracious about it initially, allowing non-commercial use. But as SCP grew, the community realized his artistic vision had been hijacked. People only saw an internet monster, not his fine art.
So in 2022, they voluntarily removed the iconic image entirely out of respect for the artist.
It's a remarkable testament to the community, and it's spawned massive spin-offs. Video games like Containment Breach, Control, Lethal Company, and Lobotomy Corporation.
SCP is the ultimate marriage of everything discussed today. It uses the dry, instructional tone of the retro Pizza Hut training videos, mixed with the dread of the analog horror tapes to describe Lovecraftian horrors.
So what does this all mean? It's like reading the Kmart Smart Plan training manual, but instead of learning how to sell a warranty, you're learning how to safely feed an immortal, world-eating slime monster. It's just brilliant. Let's recap this epic journey. We started with the innocent, physical retail giants and their cheesy training tapes. We moved through the death of MTV and the mall era, losing that physical third place.
And we explored how the internet turned those decaying VHS tapes, emergency broadcasts, and corporate documents into defining horror genres.
We dove into the reality of number stations and EAS alarms and finally saw it all combine in the SCP Foundation. And that brings us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over. Today, we look at fuzzy VHS tapes and 90s TV graphics and feel a sense of uncanny dread. But 50 years from now, when today's technology is dead, what will the analog horror of the future look like?
Will future generations be terrified by the aesthetics of a glitchy Zoom call?
Exactly, or an abandoned TikTok server, or the empty digital hallways of a VR headset. The ghosts of our media will always come back to haunt us. Thank you so much for coming along on this incredible deep dive with us. To you, the listener, stay curious, keep questioning the media around you, and we will catch you next time.